I personally feel that The Land of the Headhunters probably wouldn't have been made if Edward Curtis hadn't been able to work with George Hunt. What I understand is George Hunt was the assistant director on the film, and yeah, I don't think the film would have been made. And I would have loved to have sat with him and talked to him and heard him share what it was like for him. And I think George Hunt talked to our people and said, "Let's do this." They didn't, they weren't gonna say no to him. They all ran around in their wigs. My Uncle Tommy, who was my grandmother's brother, they shared the fact that he had to wear a mask because his skin was too white. He wasn't brown enough to be in the canoe paddling. These big abalone earrings with a cedar hat, and I do a dance on my one side of my family in the potlatch where I stand on a cedar box and I have the big earrings and the cedar hat, and it tells the story of our people warring and how the ancestors came and stopped the warring by being able to wear this regalia to share the dance in the potlatch ceremony. And it's when I was in a coming of age ceremony. I would say that we never were a vanishing race, although all the things that happened to our people to make us go underground with our potlatch has allowed it to survive today. We can still continue to be who we are. We can still continue to speak the language and share the dances and know us as a living culture. I feel that we were never the vanishing race, ever. Nugo am la kologwa, gayutlin la chanamgis lu mamalilakla. My name is Barbara Cranmer. I'm from the Numgis First Nation of Alert Bay, British Columbia.
I think she looks older than me, but like in that picture, she looks kind of sad, almost afraid. She probably has to, go and gather her own food. She's probably has a few children. If she doesn't already, she's going to have a big family. So she probably feels insecure, maybe judged. Pictures on our phone, we just take them all the time, but they probably didn't have their picture taken all the time like we do. There are probably fewer taken, so they're mean more than the ones we take, I think. It's just cool to see who we came from. They were strong people, they were strong women, so we have that in us. I don't know why. Because it makes me think of Nan. Mm-hmm. My name's Chelsea Kruger and I come from Haida Gwaii.
My name is Tia Zoni and I'm also from Haida Gwaii.
They made it so we can make it too.
The first script that Curtis wrote for In the Land of the Headhunters was called In the Days of Vancouver. From the beginning, the idea was for him to make a film that occurred just pre-contact. But as I say, the film came to be seen as a documentary for most people and to be taught as a documentary. And I think it just shows a tremendous ignorance of those communities, of Kwakwaka'wakw culture, of what it was like on the British Columbia coast in 1913, 1914. And so if you see the film as a documentary, it's really because you don't know anything about where it was made or how it was made. It couldn't be. If you look at the early advertisements, it doesn't say this is a film about pre-contact. I think Curtis left it open in a sense. And who knows if people would, say going to a theater in Seattle or New York would have even known what, say, pre-contact meant. So he left it open for people to, I think, mistakenly think that this was maybe how people lived in the present in 1914. It's pretty amazing to think that Curtis and his cameraman went up to Vancouver Island, out to Deer Island. They also went to Haida Gwaii briefly, and they went up to Blunden Harbor and actually made a feature film. It was kind of like when the movie came to town. Everybody got paid and everybody had jobs to do, and it was kind of exciting. It still has this kind of energy. Sometimes it's manic energy, sometimes it's not. But it's a very intense meeting of Curtis and the Kwakwaka'wakw that he worked with up there, and the friendship and, I think, trust that Curtis enjoyed with George Hunt and with George Hunt's, it was his second wife who made most of the costumes. And there's really nothing else like it. So if you live here, I think it's something to pay attention to in every way. All right, my name's Colin Brown. I'm a writer and filmmaker. I taught film studies and film production for many years at SFU.
I think she's giggling because, he's just made her stand there and a regular. I think we were sneaky at keeping our culture alive, and I think that we would take advantage of photos being taken to document and see our own work. Really, it was the ingenuity of our own people that brought in the regalia to be documented that made the pictures worthwhile. I think the photos were staged. They were staged and they were meant more for marketing and for creating interest and selling rather than actually documenting and capturing the real life of First Nations. Superficiality has its drawbacks. It's like saying a model is the essence of what women are about. Superficiality pulls away from what's real. I think it would be like reading Disney for history. For a lot of people that came into our communities often were for their own profit, for their own shining light on themselves, and they would use us like any other prop. I wish you would have just given your cameras to the First Nations and let them take the photos. My name is Connie Watts. I'm Tishot, Nuchoneth, Mamalilakla, Kwakwaka'wakw, and Gitxsan.
I think photographers came and took a lot of pictures. Before that, there was no such thing as pictures.
Have you ever heard of Edward Curtis?
No, not really. My family is from Skadance. And my dad's family was from Chanu. And so on down the line. That's why the posts, the totem poles that are in Kai, they're all the different places where we have chiefs coming from. Kang means sleep. Maybe there's a place named that. Most Indians don't have mustache, and my brother's only had hair here. He's got lots. His hair doesn't look black. Shouldn't it be black? It looked like his eyes are very piercing. Dungwala, that's the one that everybody knows. Are you well is what you say. We don't say goodbye. We don't say hello. But we say thank you. Hawa.
Hawa.
Skalawas Hanudi Kiraga. That's my hidden name. I'm 85. I was born on the 4th of July in 32. America celebrates my birthday.
I was really little, and I think my grandparents even had a book of Edward Curtis photos that we found like at Salvation Army or something in Seattle. And this was one of the photos that I, even as a little boy, I fell in love with. And it's not really a smile, it's not really a glare, she's not looking stoic, but just this very beautiful young woman with these large abalone earrings that I really feel, especially for us on the West Coast, the style earrings that you wear and the number of piercings means something to us in our feast hall and our potlatching. And so a lot of the people that were doing those at the time were exercising their rights and privileges in a new form, just like we do nowadays with Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. When we're at feasts and potlatches taking pictures, it makes that host even more wealthy. It makes that family even more wealthy to get that out there, showing that we're still doing what we're doing. Out of all the images, this is one that I just felt that really showed our people. For her to exercise some of her privilege in a photo, that I think it's power. Our people have gone through a really terrible, dark time. Quoting that poet Dylan Thomas, I love that. Do not go gentle into that, into the night. And I really honestly think our people raged. They raged against the dying of the light. Why simgiget sigamhanach gubawuksen gatsamil ada teeth klein ada Mike D'Angeli doayu gingolach dawatku tsamil de bereko Vancouver de zagan. My Nisga'a name is Gatsamil. I'm from the village of Gingolith. I'm from the house of Baitnach. I also hold a Tlingit name, Teeth Klein, which means big wave. My everyday name is Mike D'Angeli. I'm from Southeast Alaska and northern British Columbia, and I currently live in Vancouver, BC, and on my way to Juneau, Alaska.
I think where his images actually do the most damage is this. It creates a false sense of who Indigenous people are that is still to this day applied to our appearances. It's applied to what we wear and this idea of what's traditional and contemporary. I saw an IKEA shower curtain with a big Edward Curtis photograph not too long ago, and I thought, oh man, this guy's everywhere. And I think the disservice that his images do is that he actually had a really rich opportunity to take photographs of our people at the time rather than creating images that projected an ideal of what we were pre-contact. He took his artistic license and created scenes. These aren't scenes that he walked up upon. They're definitely not documentary. I think that the danger is this immense privilege and entitlement where people feel as though they have the right to tell an Indigenous person that they don't look Native. It's the most hurtful thing that you can possibly say to an Indigenous person. We come in a wide variety of eye color, hair color, stature, and it's been that way forever. And these images, they just reify a sense of what Indigenous people are to look like. That's like taking an image of one person out of thousands of people and holding them accountable to that person and saying, well, you don't look like that person. I get it all the time. I have light brown hair, light brown eyes, and so when people tell me that I don't look Native, I always ask them, well, how many Tsimshian people do you know? Simthlodum nusum dewayu, tauch shawat dewam gediganitsu, Dr. Michael D'Angeli dewam kamsuayu. Wo ukst amadich de watwatgo, lakski de betelgo, Vancouver, BC, Ada, Juneau, Alaska, de Wotsago. My names are Tauch Shawat, Simthlodum Nusum, and Dr. Michael D'Angeli, and I live in Southeast Alaska and British Columbia. So this is one of a few photographs I would say I have a tiny bit of affection for, just because her, just the way that she's looking at the camera and just that little bit of a smile and knowing that what she's wearing isn't something that Edward Curtis would be carrying around in his big random tickle trunk full of Indian costumes. The clothes that we were wearing at the time that these photographs were taken were different than were European style clothing compared to a lot of what he was dressing people in. I think that normally when I look at his photographs, I feel a bit of disdain because I can see how contrived they are. And I also think of our people's lives, Indigenous people's lives, at this time of intense upheaval, of the taking of children, the introduction of cash economy, just immense oppression of our cultural practices through missionization and education. But this photo being taken so far up north, that this is what was worn for survival. And you see photos of explorers at that time that they had to wear the clothing of the Indigenous people in order to do any of those expeditions, otherwise they would die. So when I look at this photo, I think of her being who she truly is and There's just this little tiny gesturing towards a smile. Simhlodam nusam dewayu. Tauch shawat dewam gidiganitsu. Dr. Michael D'Angeli dewam kamsuayu. Wo ukst amadich dewat watgo. Lakskig di patelgo. Vancouver, BC, Ada, Juneau, Alaska, Dewotsagu. My names are Tauch Shawat, Simhlodam Nusam, and Dr. Michael D'Angeli, and I live in Southeast Alaska and British Columbia.
You know, I come from both the invaders and the invaded. So it's like this very, very dichotomous background. And so I think it depends on which angle you're looking at it. Because I know for a lot of the people on my mom's side, Curtis's work softened them up, helped them see Indigenous humanity. Sure, it might have been romanticized, but it made them stop and think. It was art. You know, it did what art does. It moved them. It spoke to them in a context they understood because it was a lens, you know, a non-native lens. So he knew what would speak to his audience. And he was capturing the things that I assume anyways, he was capturing the things that he felt were beautiful. And from what I understand from, you know, some interviews of some of his models, some of them were just really happy to even kind of be stereotyped as we'd say it today, because they'd been so beaten down their whole lives, you know? And it's like they got this opportunity, you know, some of them wanted to wear the wigs because in the boarding schools they'd been made to cut all their hair and had kept it short the rest of their lives. They wanted to look like that, you know, that stereotypical Indian. They wanted to, for a moment, be proud of who they were when the rest of society wasn't. For so long, Indigenous people didn't get to have a platform, didn't get to be proud of who they were, you know, or if they were, you know, it got shut down as often as possible. There's been so many people telling us who we are. I grew up with unbroken ancestral spiritual discipline teachings, you know, and a lot of these rituals and ceremonies and customs that Curtis and people like him thought were disappearing, my family was continuously avoiding their spotlight because we were still actively practicing them in a time when it was very dangerous to do so. Noa persa tsidsta, Cynthia persa sistas at tsidskoi salakwab tistas atidbad to'ach at silkrabj. My name's Noelle Purser. I'm the daughter of Rob and Cindy Purser, and I'm from Suquamish.
I know he traveled all over the place and photographed and interviewed a lot of Native people. And I've looked at a lot of his stuff. I bought one, there's one on eBay once, it was a picture of a couple canoes from Alaska. They were sitting in the front of a village, and there was a really old picture from early 1800s. And I wasn't sure if it was his or not, but I bought it, and somebody wanted to buy it because they figured it came from their clan. I think it was from up Alaska. You can tell he was a professional photographer, you know, and the quality he had is good to look at because it's more crisper and you can see the details. people had to trust him in order to give him what they gave him. They had that trust for him. And he seemed to have that connection wherever he went. He'd be interviewing them and he's telling their story. It's through him that we're studying the stories. And I enjoyed it more learning it from my grandmother than from a photograph. It's like looking in this window, you know, he's only seeing it from the outside, and that's his interpretation. You know, my grandmother's interpretation is different than his. He said, you know, they're pretty clever to take pictures of us because he knew they're going to wipe us out. Well, I mean, that's reality. I mean, I'm not being, you know, that's what happened. So, anyway, my name is Reg Davidson, and my Haida names are Skilk Atlas and Scan Gustan Anaway and Clawaway. Clawaway is the bow of a canoe that cuts the water. Scan Gustan Anaway means frog's beard.
I think those photographs are there to show us natives are very resilient, and we have to be. You know, look at Haida Gwaii, way off from the mainland, and how did we exist for all that time before the advent of the European society? I think those pictures certainly show the strength of us, the inner fortitude. The Haida Gwaii is not for the weak. I think as a whole, yeah, we were vanishing. I mean, that was the plan. Get rid of them, and then we'd have no problem saying this is our land. Churches and the governments and all the people who like to take power, they cannot help but document how they did it. And so I think that's in our favor too. In those pictures that I did see, you could see they're our ancestors. You know, they're beautiful to look at. We were supposed to be obliterated. They did their best, and they couldn't do it. And thank you, Edward, for showing all those old people too, way back when. I'm Wayne White, and I'm from Old Macedon, Haida Gwaii. We've been here forever and ever and ever.
What strikes me about this portrait and the other portraits of women that he recorded from Haida Gwaii are that they do not show the power that you would normally see women from that time period. We're a matrilineal society, and so chiefs become chiefs through their mother, and we're part of, we get our clan and our sense of belonging from our mother. And so women would not appear only in a simple, stark blanket. There'd be a lot of possessions that would go with their name and with who they were in the community. So I think that he carried with him a different perspective of the role of women and their role in society, and it's captured in how he portrayed women in his book. He has, like many people of that time period, a very romantic view of who Indigenous peoples were, and it comes across like this image of this Haida woman who is somewhat benign and is a very romantic view of her and what her role would have been within the nation. The danger is that it gives the sense that women do not have power, and women do have power in traditional Haida culture and still do today. The term of respect that we use for a woman who is of high esteem is literally boss woman. It has, I think, had an impact on the whole process of colonization, of course, presenting women as without power, and in this romantic view, as it's helped to erode the power, the traditional power that women held. And of course, it's contributed to the situation we face today with Indigenous women in contemporary society as being stripped of their power, as not having a place and not knowing where that place is, particularly here in the urban environment. Compared to seeing a woman in her full power and in her full beauty in say, a potlatch or in ceremonies and in the community and out on the land, and teaching children about how to relate to the earth and how to relate to the ocean. My Haida name is Giralkotsli Lalachagans. My English name is Terry Lynn Williams Davidson. I'm from the Gagels Kigawai clan, or the Skidans Ravens, from the village of Skidans in Haida Gwaii.
You know, I didn't really put two and two together until later on in life. I saw his pictures and I was in love with them, and that's what made me want to be a carver. So I think in that sense, they are important. I fell in love with the Haida art form when I remember I was like 12, and I've seen some pictures in the books, and I remember asking my mom, could I do this? And she looked at me and she said, are you Haida? And right from then on, I wanted to be a totem pole carver. And I remember that distinctly. But here I am, totem pole carver. If it wasn't for those pictures, I don't know if I would have fell in love with it the way I did, right? I'm thankful for the pictures he's put out there and that are available to us because of him. I really believe that without those pictures, I might not be where I am today. My English name is Timothy Boyko, and my Haida name is Lada. It's hard to stare at a camera and be natural.
When I look at Curtis photos, there's a sense of power, nobility, tradition. Even though they're staged, you can still see the strength within the culture and the people. Yeah, they're pretty powerful images. They're definitely recognizable. You see Curtis images representing Canada and the Pacific Northwest coast all over the world. When you look at the images, you start to recognize different characteristics of the setting. For example, why is he wearing a nose ring? Then you learn more about status within the culture. Could anybody wear a nose ring? Was it common for a nose ring? So because he's holding a copper, then there's different hints of the individuals. So was he a chief due to his nobility through the nose ring and the copper? But as you learn more about the culture and the traditions, you start to recognize the hints to the individuals in the photos. So it's great for history purposes, but also quite unique throughout the world to pick up a book and read about my grandparents' lives and have, many of the stages throughout their whole life documented in very detail. So we're lucky, but it's also quite bizarre. I can't imagine life without the images. They've always been around and a part of growing up and something to look back to. So it's hard for me to imagine these images never being taken. G'day Kasla. My name is Trevor Isaac. I'm from the Alert Bay, and I work at the Umista Cultural Center.
For me, I'm glad that there was somebody doing that back in the day. We would have never had anything to look at, even though some people may not think it was a good thing. But one thing I want to say about old Curtis is we always want to prove that we're not the Vanicine race like he called us.
I guess at the time he said that, we were sort of disappearing because of the disease and the things that the white man brought to our people.
We want to prove that he's wrong. We have a cultural group here in Alert Bay called Tsasatla, which means to be determined. We're determined to keep our culture alive.
Right, in some sense, we proved that we're rebounding fast. And when we watch our children dancing and performing our culture, we know that we're going to keep growing and we'll never disappear. But I don't think it was his intention to to put our people down. I think it was his intention to kind of capture us. When you see a film like Curtis left, it gives me a good feeling that he left something behind to remind us that we had a system in place. A lot of times when you talk to non-Indian people, they think that that you ran on uncontrolled. We had laws and rights that we practiced among ourselves. And those title and rights still exist today because people like Curtis left us with that memory of what we were like.
He might have been confused a few times and trying to figure us all out. I think people are still trying to figure our people out. For me, I'm just going to always prove him wrong, that we're not the Vanicine race, and we're going to continue to teach and make the children feel proud of who they are, and they can proudly say, Nu Guam, I am, and say their Indian names and where they're from.
There's a story my aunt told me, Ellen Neal. She was always asked to go and speak in schools. And she spoke in one school, and one of the young students asked her, do the Indians still scalp? And she said, no, we just chop the head off. Chop the heads off, she said.
I'm Vera Newman. I'm from Alert Bay, BC.
And I'm Edwin Newman. Grew up in Bella Bella.
Oh, that's a princess, and she's on 2 slaves, and they're holding her up. And she's got a bunch of bracelets on, and she's got a nobility hat with abalone shells on it. And her name's Chukwani, I think. That's George Hunt's second wife. And his first wife was my grandmother, Lucy Humiskinis. And that's where all the descendants come from. And I come from Johnny Hunt. Audie, his name was. And Audie acted in the Land of the Headhunters. He used to always joke around and say that he was a movie star. He used to tell my mom that. He was one of the ones on a canoe, paddling the canoes, and one of the warriors that were, one of those characters. And he said that when that canoe flipped over the Almudrona, they didn't even care. He just kept rolling away there on his camera. Yeah, those are the little things that he talked about. Well, it's something you're proud of, but we are on Oakshell, our nobility. So yeah, we did stand at the forefront. We're actors. We do that in a big house, and if you come and see that potlatch coming up pretty soon, you'll see what I mean. We're actors. That's what we do. Yeah, and so we already had a knack for it already. We're traditionalists, and when you're a traditionalist, you keep it the way it is. We don't make this up. We do what we were told to do by our ancestors and their ancestors and their ancestors and their ancestors. And it was passed down from generation to generation to generation. And Edward did a good job, and he had vision, foresight. I mean, I know that it wasn't really accepted back then, but it was way ahead of its time. Everybody wanted to see teepees, and everybody wanted to see bonnets and horses and things like that. But this is the way we lived here, and we lived on the northwest coast with a unique culture, high civilization. Yeah. Not only that, but it proved my grandfather Johnny Hunt that he was a movie star. Quaggilt from Fort Rupert, and Nungleys from here, Alert Bay. Tsawadinook and Quikusutinuk also. That's from Kinkum and Guilford Island.